Okay. Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Digital Classroom. And today, well, we're not in the studio. So stay tuned. We're going to explain in a few seconds why we are not in the studio and what's going on. It's nothing exciting, to be honest. Okay, so the whole idea today was to do a nice photo shoot with our model Claudia and an awesome Harley Davidson from a friend of mine. But 1 hour before the broadcast, we got a phone call and our model Claudia is sick. So get well soon, Claudia, and we wish you all the best, of course. But because we also did promotion for Digital Classroom and also our partners, of course, did promotion, I thought it wasn't fair to, well, sorry, to don't do a broadcast. So I decided, you know what, we're going to do something different. We get so many questions in every time, so we thought, let's do an episode where we're going to give a presentation, but slightly different. So bear with me. It's going to be a lot of fun, trust me. But first, let me introduce the sponsors, of course. We have our good friends from BenQ. They deliver great monitors, perfect colors, and hardware calibratable. Now, if you're in the European Union and you want a 10% discount, just drop me an email. We have some coupons left for a 10% discount, so just give me an email about that one. Then we have, of course, Calibrite, one of the companies that we work with for years, and they deliver, for example, the color checkers and, of course, also the calibration tools for your monitor. Then we have Click Backdrops, our backdrops. We have a signature series, but we are also the distributor for Click Backdrops. So when you hear me promoting Click Backdrops, do remember we only sell products that I've been using for at least a year myself and sometimes even longer. Those are the products that I actually use. We're not promoting products that I don't use. We only promote the products that I use. Another program that I use a lot, and we are very glad that they actually extended their sponsoring of Digital Classroom, is Cascable. And this is something where I always want to give a little bit more attention for Cascable. Hey, Anouk. Cascable is a program that runs on your iPad or your iPhone, and they also have, I believe, desktop versions, where you can shoot tethered, wireless, or with a cable to your iPad. Now, working tethered is already a huge improvement because you see your images coming in right away. You can add presets and it's just very, very easy. But not having to drag your laptop on location is awesome because now you can just bring your iPad. The battery runs almost all day and you have a lot of light output. As long as you have an iPad that has USB-C, you can just connect your camera straight into the iPad and you can start shooting. If your camera is supported, of course, but even my Sony a7R V is supported. Another brand that we are also the distributor for is IQ Wire. You already see it. Tethering, of course, you can do it wireless, but I don't trust wireless in all honesty. It always works until it has to work. So we're using IQ Wire cables. They have 5 meters, 10 meters and 15 meters without any connectors in between. So it's one cable. They do have boosters, of course, inside, and they have a great defense system. Just look them up on our website. It's really great. The final brand that sponsors Digital Classroom is Rogue. And Rogue, we've known for over 15 years. You probably know the Flashbender. And Rogue is just a great company. And 2 years ago, we actually started our distributorship for them. So we are now also the distributor for Rogue. And of course, not in our sponsor list yet is Gikoto. Also one of our brands. So it will be there the next time you watch Digital Classroom, of course, because it's our own brand. Okay, let me see. In between, you can ask questions, whatever you want. Let me see. There we go. Yeah, you know, I hope I pronounce your name correct, Hota Kainen. It's also hot over here, and we have a Labradoodle, as you know, and we just keep him on the grass. So we don't let him walk on the streets, just on the grass. But in all honesty, normally he's always happy for a walk, but with this kind of weather, he just looks outside, he goes like, no freaking way, and he just goes inside again. So yeah, it's always fun. Okay, so what are we going to do today? Today we are doing a presentation, and the presentation is, I think, really interesting. So keep watching, but first I have some amazing news for you guys. Now, you know that over the years I've written some books and we've done a lot of tutorials for Calibite, for Udemy, for Skillshare, for some other platforms, including one in China where they actually, well, redubbed my voice. That sounds really weird, by the way. And of course, we keep finding new stuff. Now, I'm the kind of guy that doesn't like to repeat myself. So if I make a tutorial, it has to be something completely new. And that's why there hasn't been a lighting tutorial for a while. But that's all gonna change. Because today, we introduce to you Inside the Model Shoot, a brand new full-length tutorial, almost 90 minutes, with gear, tethering, workflow, color theory, different light shapers, advanced use of gel. Well, you can read yourself, working with models, several photo shoots, and in-depth lighting explained. It's working exactly the way as Digital Classroom and the behind-the-scenes video. So it's jam-packed with information. You see all the lighting setups. I think it's a great video. We had so much fun making it, and well, it's the images we're using is great. But one of the things that we do, and I'm going to show you that in the presentation, is we're actually using 3 gels, red, green and blue, to create a neutral color. So how does that work? Well, stay tuned, because we're going to start our presentation, and part of the presentation is exactly that. So let's go. Okay, so first things first. What drives you as a photographer? That's the thing that everybody asks me, like, how can I create images that move people, that give people a certain feeling, or that tell a story? So I thought it would be cool for today to do exactly that. So let's see, finding the triggers. Now, of course, your trigger was probably a beautiful girl on a Harley Davidson. Isn't that awesome? And a little bit mean, right? But trust me, we are going to do the Digital Classroom with the Harley Davidson and Claudia, only it's going to be a little bit later. So when is the Digital Classroom with Claudia, Annewiek?
What?
When is the Digital Classroom with Claudia?
August 1.
Okay, 1st of August, we're going to do the one with the Harley Davidson. Oh, Annewiek already said it in the chat. Okay, so triggers. Now, for me, triggers is also something like leading lines. Like, in our old studio, we had this staircase, and the thing was with the staircase, I didn't want it there. I wanted it all the way in the back of the studio, because for me, a staircase just took up space. And I wanted as steep as possible, because I didn't want it to take up any space. And just look at this. As the moment we placed a model on it, the staircase became something else. It didn't become that annoyance in our studio. It actually became a great prop. So we started painting the wall behind it. We started painting the staircase. That gave me a little bit of a weird vibe from my parents, because they made the staircase beautifully white and the wall behind it white. And they said, well, the rest of the studio is already with all these funky colors and structure and walls that aren't white. They don't get it, that those are, of course, your photographic backdrops. And the staircase was so beautifully white. And as you can see in this picture, it isn't white anymore. We made it like more like an urbex look. But hey, that's what works for us photographers, right? A white staircase with a white backdrop. It's funny, but hey, this looks way better. So lines, and lines can be from other staircases too, like for example, outside or inside. And as you can see here, the staircase actually is a sort of leading line towards my sitting model. Look at the foot. You can see that there's like a triangle in which the model is, and look at the feet of the model, or sorry, the legs of the model. It also creates a nice triangle. Using triangles, using shapes in your photography is a huge trigger. It triggers people, just like with landscape photographers, when they look at those leading lines. That's the trick for me. And of course, outside staircases, it's just awesome. And this was actually the first image we took with the staircase. Do you see it? It's still white in the backdrop. And in all honesty, the shadows look really nice. So you might wonder, how did we shoot this? It's actually not that hard, but it was very tricky to do, because as I mentioned, I didn't want the staircase to be in the way. So we placed it all the way in the back of the studio with only a small space to actually get on the staircase. And that was a mistake, because I wanted to place lighting there, and the only light source I could actually place there nicely at that point was a strip light with a grid. And that's actually what I use in almost all those shots, except the one with the couple, of course. That was a normal softbox. Now, of course, time progresses, and now we have the smaller hybrid strobes from Gigoto. Now I can place a larger softbox, because the strobes are smaller in that same area. The only problem is we're not shooting in that area anymore, because now it's part of, well, actually it's behind me. It's part of our, what we call the bat cave. or you can call it a man cave, whatever you want. Another thing that triggers me is always smoke. Now, smoke can be a really cool way to hide stuff. In other words, if you have a location that looks nice, but it isn't there yet, use a little bit of smoke and it transforms that whole area into something that's way more interesting, that's way more engaging, and it also looks great on photos. Do remember with smoke to always light it from the back. As soon as you have your model and a light source in front of your model, the smoke will become a pure white curtain, and that doesn't really work. Now some people will say like, hey Frank, I don't get it. The smoke in front of your model is white, so you're lighting it from the front, right? No. That's the cool thing. There's something in photography that's called chiaroscuro, and also of course in art. And that means you go from light to dark, from light to dark, from dark to light, from, you know what I mean, right? Light, dark, light, dark. And that's actually what's happening here. Look at the face of the male model. You can see that we're using light from the side and absolutely not from the front. The reason you are seeing that smoke lit up is because we are lighting it from the back. And that's the cool thing about smoke. Light it from the back and it will start to turn white. The other thing that's really cool about smoke is that it also reflects the light back. So some of the detail you see in his suit is actually because of the smoke. Isn't it just awesome? So same here, we have a scene, the scene is okay, trigger point, just a little bit of smoke, and of course, well, available light, in this case a chandelier. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But also, like here on the staircase, lens flare from the top and just a little bit of smoke. Now recently on YouTube there was a discussion between me and somebody else, and there are a lot of those discussions, and some discussions are just downright mean. I don't get it. We give you stuff for free. Don't be mean. If you don't like it, don't watch. Don't subscribe, don't do anything, but don't attack a creator, because we spend a lot of time creating stuff for you guys. But this was actually a really cool conversation. And it was about how do you call smoke? The difference between smoke, haze, and for example, ice. Now, for me as a Dutch person, and I hope I pronounce this correctly, there are a few different kinds of smoke. The first one is where we try to stick the smoke to the floor. This is where, for example, we channel the smoke through an ice bucket. We hardly ever do that. We did it once in the past, and in all honesty, it worked, but it was way too much work. What you can much better do is get a smaller smoke machine, like the lens goes we sell on our website, and just use the attachment where you just place it on the floor and it just stays on the floor. It's really cool stuff. The other smoke that I often use is smoke. Now, with smoke, I mean the thicker particles. So not the stuff that you see here, but actually the stuff that you saw before, like this. This I call smoke, the thicker part. Now, as soon as we go through this I call haze. Now, the nice thing about smoke machines is that you can have all those different kinds of smoke in only one machine. When you start out and you pump a lot of smoke, that's where you get those really nice curls, those structures in the smoke. That's what I call thicker smoke. Now, as soon as you wait a little while, you get haze. This is when all the smoke goes away and you just leave that shimmer of haze. Now, that haze is really cool, and they use it in Hollywood a lot. For example, if somebody turns on the flashlight in a dark attic, there's always smoke. Now, if that happens with you, run away, because probably somewhere there's fire or whatever. It shouldn't be like that, but in a movie it works great, right? Now, another thing that is a trigger point is color. Now, watch this. This is Nadine in a red suit. Now, in all honesty, it looks great, but it does miss something. And what does it miss? Well, it misses something called contrast. So let's bump up the contrast a little bit with our lighting. Now, there we go. This is much better. Now, as you can see, the red is a color that really jumps out, like here, or here, and here. Now, what's going on? Now, I love to talk about color, and that also has to do with my other company, and that's actually a home theater company. And for the home theater company, I have an ISF calibration certificate, and that means the Imaging Sounds Foundation. What it actually means is that I calibrate projectors, TVs, and computer screens, of course, but computer screens are easy because it's hardly everything is automated. Now, what you will find out when you work with colors is that we have a certain kind of emotions connected to color. For example, red is an emotional color, blue is an emotional color, and green is a color that doesn't really call an emotion with me. But red is a really interesting emotion color, because red, well, it is hate, love, and warmth, and cozy. So only when I can use red in my story. Do I want it to make it warm and cozy? I will use, for example, red from the back with lens flares or a little bit of smoke. But if I want red to be aggressive and straight in your face, I will use it in a logo, or I will use it, for example, in a dress. Now, there is something that you have to be careful for. There is a certain rule in photography. Color to jump somebody out, we need that rule. And that 60-30-10 rule is actually something that you can hold on to. So what does it mean? 60% of the scene should be a color. 30% of the scene should be an adjunct color, so a connected color. So let's say, for example, you choose red, you can use orange, you can use yellow, you can use a little bit red, more saturated red, but you can't use, for example, green or blue. Now that 10%, that's an accent color. And for me, that's often the color that's connected to my primary color on the horizontal axis. So for me, that means red connects to blue on the horizontal axis. So two primary colors on the opposites of the spectrum. So that's why in my photography, you see a lot of red and blue. Now, when you look at the scene, for example, here, you see that I choose for a lot of muted colors, green, brownish, and then that red really jumps out. Also, of course, helped by using aimed lighting on my model. But you can do it more extreme. What about, for example, when you have somebody with red hair? It really jumps out. As you can see here, you don't even see the eyes, but the image just jumps immediately out. Or how about if you do day to night? You almost do it monochromatic, and then that little shiver of red in the coat. Think about when the coat would be blue. No, right? Or black. Then the image wouldn't make any sense. But by using red, you really get that nice accent in your image. Or, for example, if you do a glamour shot and the model already has red hair, red bretelles, I don't know the English word for that. Brassiers? No? Probably. So same here, the red really evokes emotion for me. Only in this case, I chose for a different approach. Of course, you have the 60-30-10 rule. That's the rule to something to really jump out. What I'm doing here is, you might say the opposite, but I want my model to jump out. So what do? The backdrop has a color that's related to the red. So although the red still jumps out, my model jumps out even more, because my model is a totally different luminosity and a totally different color, of course. So at that point you can see that although it's in balance, the model jumps out even more than in the other shots. Same here. The model goes a little bit to the backdrop. You see that because that red and that bright backdrop, those are contrasting with each other. And that means that I lose a little bit of the model. On the other hand, I just love this shot because it's so straight in your face. Now, by using red as a backdrop color, you can create warmth. And you get that really nice idea of, wow, this looks really nice. And you get a certain feeling with this. Now imagine this image with blue. It feels totally different, right? So that red really has a function there. Here that red has the same function. It creates a certain mood, a little bit of a horror movie, a little bit of danger. And I really like that, of course, in a shot. Hey, I'm a big movie lover and I love horror movies. And the same here. Again, we're using red as our main attraction and trigger point. Okay, so mixing light sources. That's something that you already saw in the previous set. Let me just show you very quickly the last one. There you go. Okay. So mixing light sources, this is something that comes back a lot, and it is understandable because this is something that you use all the time on location in your studio or wherever you shoot. There's always available light. Now, when I shoot in the studio, a trick that I always use is the first image, I don't use my trigger. I take it off or I just turn it off. And that means that the first image that comes in is 100% black, if I don't have any available light. This is a great way to test the level of ambient light in a location. For example, if I shoot on an event, I will take a picture without the strobes on, and I will just look at, oh, on 5.6 I still see some outlines. Let's just shoot everything on f8 for today. But if I shoot 2.8 and everything is dark, I have way more latitude and way more options to work, for example, with my depth of field. So the first image is always 100% black, and then you start using your strobes. But what if you want to include that available light? For example, you have very nice lighting on the backdrop, or you have a Christmas tree, and you want those lights in your image. Well, there's a very, very simple trick for this nowadays, and that's called your EVF, your electronic viewfinder. Now, you can do it two ways. the first way you can do it is of course very simple by setting up your strobe on the lowest setting possible. Use a light shaper that eats light, in other words, for example, a strip light with a grid, a large softbox with a grid and an extra diffuser, but don't use, like for example, a 14-inch reflector. That doesn't make any sense for that shot. Don't use an open reflector or a Fresnel. Those give way too much light. So the idea is the lowest setting possible on your strobe. For example, on our G-Kotos, that's 128th of a second. So, oh, sorry, 100 and let me rephrase that. 128th power. Ooh, that was a tongue breaker for me. So the lowest setting possible, a light shaper that eats light, and then you just use your light meter on your model and you just go poof. And let's say it's f2.8 on ISO 800. You take the shot and now you just lower your shutter speed to let in more of the ambient light, or raise the shutter speed to take away ambient light. The problem with studio strobes, of course, is if you don't shoot HSS, you don't use leaf shutter lenses or a global shutter, is that you are stuck with your, well, X sync, or in other words, 125th of a second. You can't go any higher, or you get that nasty black bar on top of your image. Sony is going to change that all with their global shutter, and it will take a few years, of course, before that's in all their cameras. So for now, we are still shot with that nasty black bar if we shoot faster, or we have to go for HSS. So lowering the shutter speed for ambient light is actually the only option. You don't want to go higher, because then you can literally just lower your ISO and just raise your strobe, so it doesn't make any sense to go higher. So the other approach, and that's a more interesting approach I think, is just know your strobes and just use your EVF. So just take your camera, set it on, for example, you know it's already at 2.8, it's already on 125th of a second, you know that's your strobe. You just look through the viewfinder and you just lower your shutter speed until you see that light coming up. So you don't have to shoot and check with your electronic viewfinder, you can literally just change that over. Now, why do I call that two approaches? Because in essence, when I use the light meter, I do exactly the same. I lower my light, I meter it, and then I raise my shutter or I lower my shutter to let in more available light. The thing is, with an EVF, you have two options. The first one is emulate an OVF, in other words, an optical viewfinder. This is the way that you should normally shoot in your studio. Why? Very simple. If you shoot 125th, ISO 100, f16, your camera will show a totally black screen. A lot of people email me about this and they go like, hey, why do you use those crappy Sony cameras in a photo shoot if you only have that black screen? Yeah, read the manual, because there's also another option in every camera that has an EVF, including of course the Sony. And with Sony it's called setting effect. On Canon, I believe it's called emulation of lighting, and Nikon has a similar lighting exposure compensation or something. What it means is, if you look through the viewfinder and you turn that option off, you just see the world as you would normally see with a normal DSLR. In other words, if you change your lighting, the OVF would just show you the same thing. Now, if you switch the option on, now it gets interesting, because in the studio your image will be 100% black. But as soon as you start using available light, or for example continuous light sources, now you literally see what you're gonna get, because that's actually what that setting is. See what you're gonna get. So if you're struggling in the studio and your image is always black except when you focus, because then the aperture opens of course, try to find a lighting correction or emulation, because that's the problem. Okay, so low setting on your strobe, and just use your shutter speed to let in the available light. These are small Christmas lights. I bought them on, I believe, AliExpress for, I think maybe €6 or something. They send it, and it's not a great quality, of course. I wouldn't say it's a fire hazard, but it doesn't look really great. But during a photo shoot, we don't care. It's €6, and we use it once or twice, and then we throw them out, or we give them away, or we use them in our home. It's a very, very nice way to get some cool images, as you can see here. It just gives you that little bit of extra for me. All the same lighting. Now, of course, you can also use lighting from the top, like for example here some LED panels, and you add that to your strobes. So we have one strobe on our model, we have some LED panels on the side, and the Christmas lighting you see on the top is really, really very, very faint. And this was one of the shots where I literally had to push my ISO a lot. Same here, we're using available light in those little details in the top, and everything else is strobes. And that's a little bit of the problem with these kinds of shots. you don't see the available light or that continuous light source as a main light source, but you do see some noise in the images. And this is where nowadays, of course, Lightroom comes in. Now, if you haven't tried it out, try the new noise reduction in Lightroom. It's really very, very good. Now, if you want a little bit better and you also want to sharpen your images, then make sure you check out Topaz Photo AI. It goes a little bit further than Lightroom, it's faster, and it has great sharpening options. And in all honesty, I can't live without Lightroom and Photoshop, and I use Topaz more as a plugin. But if you really want to get every inch of detail out your shots, try out Topaz. I think you're really gonna like it. Here, the available light is a little bit more obvious. So when you have a little bit of noise in an image like this, it's actually not really a problem. Do realize these images are often ISO 3200, 6400, so it's not that high in your ISO. When I would have said that 10 years ago, ISO 3200 was literally one big noise fest. But nowadays cameras are awesome. And for me, I don't know how you like it, but mixing light sources with continuous lighting and of course your strobes just gives you such a surreal image. This almost reminds me of Wednesday from the Addams Family in style a little bit. And you can do the same thing, of course, when you start using, for example, the Pavo tubes. Those are from Nanlights, and those are those little LED tubes. I really love using them. Now in this case, we're using, I believe, one Pavo tube from the right in blue, and everything else is the lighting from what the model is wearing. And if I'm correct, I believe we have a snoot here on our face. Same here. As you can see, it's just awesome when you incorporate that continuous lighting in, for example, a headpiece. It gives you a really, really cool look. And these lights, that's the funny part, one of the students actually is a mountain biker, and she had some lights with her that she normally uses on her bike. And she said like, but these are really faint for a photo shoot. So we just glued them on one of the glasses of the glasses. And the other one we had here on her chest. And as you can see here, as long as you leave the shutter open long enough, and you use a black diffusion filter, you get some really funky looks. I just love that. Do also be aware, a lot of people email me like, hey Frank, you got those black diffusion filters, I got them too, but I don't get the effect that you have, this really nice glow effect. Now that glow effect, it's really important that you get your light source straight into your lens. As you can see here, from the side it doesn't work, but when you look from the front, look at that. Now you get way more of that glow effect. And that's the same with lens flares. If you want lens flares to show up in your images, make sure that you shoot it under an angle and that it really hits your lens and not the model. If it doesn't hit your lens, the lens flare won't look as nice as it can be. Okay, and of course, well, sometimes you go crazy by using natural light or available light. So another thing that really is a trigger point for me as an, well, look behind me, we have a lot of comics there and of course guitars. And comics for me is something that's different from a movie. With a movie you're limited to your budget and stunts and everything that's possible. In a comic you don't have those limitations. If you want to blow up a city, you blow up a city. If you want to drop a nuke somewhere and survive, no problem at all. No special effects, you just draw it. And I think for the costumes in comics, there is no limitation. So, for example, if you look at the Batman costume, it's totally ridiculous. He can fight in that because he's a long cape, he's covered, so he shouldn't be moving around like an athlete. He should be moving around more like, oh my God, I can't move. But in a comic, that's no problem. And I believe that was one of the biggest challenges, by the way, for the filmmakers when they made the Batman movies. How do we make a suit that looks like the comics, but the actor doesn't move around like he's stuck in some kind of tube? So comics are awesome. But what if you bring the comics into real life? There's a name for that, and it's called cosplay. So a few years ago, I actually put a call out like, hey, I want to do something more extreme work. I want to work on my lighting, but most of all, I want to work on my storytelling. Who is interested in cosplay? And we got a lot of responses. And I want to show you some of the images that we shot that are a little bit more extreme, but maybe for you, that could be a trigger point to be a little bit more creative. For example, you can do it with no theme. So this is just a fantasy character probably. Or you can do it, for example, with From Helsing and a vampire. Now, the thing is, when you look at these shots, it didn't start out that way. When it started out, it just stood next to each other like, hey, look at the costumes. For me, that's not cosplay. For me, photography is storytelling or capturing unique moments in time that never come back again. But for me, cosplay should be about storytelling. So they should act. So we took a stick from our bicycle storage. I don't know how to call it. It's a bicycle rack outside of our studio. We put a piece of wood. We made a spike out of it. Oh, there we go. And I just told my model, scream and just hit her very, very hard without, of course, hitting her really. So freeze there. So no danger, please. And this is literally where she stopped her spike, but it didn't matter because there was speed and there she stopped. And for the photo, there's a huge difference between doing this and shoot or doing this and shoot. You can see it in my face already. When I do this, I just pose, but when I really put my hands in it, you can see it in the expression. Now look at the model. You can literally see my model screaming in power, but also look at her arms. You can see that there's a different pose there. So one of the tips I always give people is make the model move in these kinds of sets. Don't just pose it and shoot it. No, pose it, say, okay, this is the shot that I want. 1, 2, 3, go. And then she makes that move. Now these, of course, are characters. And the thing with cosplay is they always try to get as close as possible to the costumes, but they also give their own twist. And I think that's the most challenging part about shooting cosplay. Talk with your model about what is the character about. Is it an evil character? Is it a nice character? Is it a magical character? Because the way that you choose your backdrops, your smoke, your lens flare, your whole theme will determine how that character is perceived. For example, if you shoot it with blue, it's distant, it's a little bit colder, it's a little bit more dangerous. But when you shoot it with with red, it can be more warm, it can be even more dangerous, or a little bit more like, oh, I really like that character, you know, love, warmth. So yeah, color and talking with your model about what do you want to do. For example, a shot like this, Bride of Frankenstein, you can shoot it in color against a white backdrop, but why? A little bit of Photoshop, and the smoke and everything is real, by the way, and everything in the photo is real except the cross and a little bit of the castle in the back. That was added in Photoshop. And trust me, it was not added with AI. These were shots that we took in Scotland. Now, I do use AI, and I'm not afraid to admit it. And I only use it actually to extend backdrops, or when I use it and you see it in an image, you know it's AI, because you will see snakes on the floor and everything, and it will look like AI. We did, of course, do photo shoots with snakes, and then you will see that it's not AI. But I think AI is... What, Annemiek? Yes, you see the photo. It's still the Bride of Frankenstein. So when you shoot with... now I lost my track. When you shoot with animals or you shoot with other stuff and it's real, I always try to do it as safe as possible. But if you have a shot like, for example, where you want a snake to crawl over the floor, that's the part where I don't have any problems with you using AI. I just don't like the whole text-to-image stuff where you just type in something and you claim it's your work. That's just totally ridiculous. Same here, by desaturating the colors, we get a certain look, and again, storytelling. And today it's a little bit also about colors. Same thing with color. You see the difference? I'm still in doubt which one I like more. This one I really like because I choose a lower angle, and because of that darker color and that more saturated look, it becomes more freaky, a little bit more old-fashioned, like those really old movies. When I look at this, I still like it, but for different reasons. Now, because I'm shooting it from the top down, it's not that scary, but it is. And that is a little bit helped by the smoke and the blue where the model is coming out, but it's much less stronger for me than this one. So sometimes color helps, and sometimes color can also just limit you. So always be aware of that. Now, in this case, of course, again, cosplay, what's not to like? Look at how they're going for it. And this is something that a lot of models can't do. Most models that I work with are really good with expression and they really can move around and act, but we get so many people that do our test shoots, and when I ask them to act just a little bit, they almost always close up and they go like, what do you mean? And I go like, well, scream. And I go like, how? Well, with your mouth. and not just with your mouth, but with your eyes and with your whole body. When you scream, it's not like, when you scream, it's like, you know, you really have to put power in there. And that's what you see here. This is acting on a 1,000th of a second. And that's what I love about good cosplay models. Literally awesome. And of course, sometimes, well, this is not Photoshop. This is really, really tight. You could hardly breathe. Again, using colors and smoke, and in this case, also look at the direction of the light. I'm doing something really tricky here. I'm using one angle this way for the red light, and I thought that at that point, people were leaving the photo because there wasn't a real attention point on the bottom. So by using just a little bit shimmer of light over there, and in the original image, of course, our logo is on the left bottom part, you see that there's this triangle going on again, and it's just a shiver of light that you need there just to draw the attention of the viewer towards another point. Same here, red. And of course, some cosplay. Now with cosplay, it's all about telling that story. With normal photography and with your portrait photography, or when you shoot a CEO, it's very important that you shoot the CEO or your sitter in a normal way, like you capture their character. If it's something with authority, you shoot it slightly up. If it's somebody that's really open and friendly, why use a tie? Just open up the top button, for example. Just work with that kind of stuff. But when you work with cosplay or with storytelling, you don't have to see the face. Now look at this image, for example. You can see the face of the girl coming out of the TV, a little bit inspired by Ringu, but you don't see the face of the one running away. Or do you? Well, look very closely at the shot. Do you see the face? Yes, of course. And that's a trick that you can use all the time. And that's called filling in the blanks. Now, we all know how a face looks, right? So when with lighting, I just make sure that you see a part of the mouth, a part of the nose, and I make sure that the eyes are totally black. You just recognize it as a face. Now, don't try to get light in those eyes. It will not look right. It will look weird. It will look over the top. This just works great. The hand stretching out, as you can see, there's just a little bit of light from the back. Now, we didn't use a strobe for that. And you know what we used? Look very closely at the image and remember what I told you about reflections. Yes, smoke. So a shot like this looks incredibly simple, but it isn't. You have to make sure that the shadows on the face are absolutely right. So you can still see a little bit here, a little bit more here, those darker eyes. You have to see the nose. You have to see a little bit of the mouth. And then with the hand, we took a few shots, and this was a little bit tricky because every time she did it slightly different, but I wanted that hand to reach out and just have a little bit of smoke behind her that was lit from the back, so you just see a very, very faint outline. Now, if this wouldn't have worked, I probably would have aimed just a very, very tiny snoot on it with maybe an extra grit or two, just to make sure that that outline is there. The problem is when you do it with a snoot, even when you really pinpoint it, there's always a chance of a really nasty double shadow, or a shadow that falls forward, or you just have a very, very nasty accent here, where you see all the hair standing up because it's a harsh light source. Using the smoke makes it very, very dark, but still you see the contrast between the hand and the smoke. So very subtle, but very important in the shot. And overall, let's be honest guys, it's about those small details. Lighting a model with a big softbox is no problem. Lighting a model with very, very small light sources against a very bright backdrop is no problem. Making sure that your model jumps out in every single part where you want, this is where you start to open up your trick box. In other words, this is where you start to use lens flares, because lens flares also opens up shadows. You start to use smoke to just give a little bit of light there, or you use very, very smartly your reflectors, just a little bit. And remember, subtlety is king in these kinds of setups. You don't want it to be like over the top, hey, there's a hand, that takes you away out of the shot. But hey, that's all personal, right? Same here. I didn't like the shot per se, so what did we do? In this case, we didn't use any smoke. We used Boris FX, a very, very nice plugin, and we just use the lighting and a little bit of, I believe, fog from Boris FX. So this one is fake, but hey, I still like the outcome, right? So why not? I took the shot, I took the lighting, and I just added this. Same here. we are using a little bit of lighting from one side to light our model, and that light actually just wraps around over the wings. So only one light source needed here. You don't need an accent lighting. Now with Cosplay you can of course also exaggerate stuff. So for example, use wide angles, really close on the floor, use a wide angle, and in this case we use some chairs in the front to create a little bit of a set, some trusses in the back, she has a big machine gun, we use some camouflage material, and of course a lot of smoke. And you're there. So it's all what your mind just fills in. Probably the first time you look at this, you don't see chairs, but you probably see spikes coming out, maybe from metal, from something that was exploded. Maybe even your eyes draw in some concrete that's not there. That's the cool thing. If you hide stuff in the darkness and you just let stuff jump out and you tell the story correctly, your mind will do the rest. Your mind will fill in the blank. That's the trigger point. Your mind has to do the work. And of course, we love to work with high contrast shots. So in this case, when everything is dark in the front, I don't want a light backdrop because I think that doesn't work really, really nice. So what I did here, the darker backdrop really absorbed the model. Placing just a spot behind the model made it a little bit too, well, photographed. So I decided, you know what, let's place the spot a little bit lower, angle the light a little bit so you get a more rectangular spot, and of course use an accent light. But what can we do with the accent light? Yes, if we don't aim the accent light straight at our model, we actually get a lot of that light in our lens. And that means, as you can see here, that we get lens flare. But there's also another added benefit when we do a technique like this. When you aim your light towards the camera instead of your model, you're doing two things. The first thing is you create lens flare. If you want it, great. The second thing that you do is you're lighting your model with the sides of the light. Now the center of the light is always very harsh and bright. The more you go to the sides, the softer the light quality, but also the lower the output. So that means that you can pump a lot of power straight into your lens to get lens flare, but you can still have a very, very nice soft accent light on your model. Now in all honesty, when I started out with this technique, I did it totally different. I used one main light source, then I placed a strip as an accent on my model, and then one strobe with an open reflector aimed straight at my camera to create the lens flare. And then I just started thinking like, why? Why don't I mix the strip light with the open reflector? Now, at first, of course, you place that reflector behind your model to get that accent light, and then you will quickly find out that that doesn't work. Because that accent light is way too bright, you can see all the hair standing up because it's a harsh light source. And then I found a trick. Just move that light next to your model. So if this is your model and this is your light, just move them next to each other, but still aim them towards your camera. The light will spread out enough to give you a little bit of an accent, and if it's not enough, just place it by 10 centimeters back up until you like it. But that big light source, that huge power of light, that hits your lens and that creates that beautiful lens flare that you see. Add a gel and, well, it's party time. As you can see here. Don't you just love those eyes? Look at that expression, wow. Wide angle, see the difference? That's why that shot is in there. This is a standard lens. It's a little bit wider, but it's, you know, it looks great. If this was the only shot that I showed you, you'd probably go like, yeah, great. You can see the wide angle effect, but what if you go to 24mm and you really shoot it under an angle? And that's the trick about wide angles. The center part often looks pretty normal. It's the sides that distort. And think about it, the lens is actually round, right? It's not flat like your normal lenses. So by using the sides of the lens, you get the most distortion. So you don't want the face of the model in there. But you do want something in there because you need that line. Because if you just use a wide angle, people will go like, hey, that looks weird, it looks distorted. But if you use that wide angle as a leading line, for example, by placing a foot in front of a hand or the gun, let's take a look at this camera, for example. If I sit like this, you don't see any difference, but when I do this, you can see that my hand is getting really, really big, and that's because this is a wide angle. The camera doesn't see depth. The camera only sees stuff that's closer as larger and that's further away as smaller. By using a wide angle, you change the distance between you and your model. So if something is sticking out, the distance between your lens and that stuff that's sticking out is shorter than when you use a tailor lens or a longer lens from further away. So wide angles, awesome, but do aware that they do add a lot of distortion. Okay, the next part is color, but before we go to color, I want to show you very quickly our brand new promo for our brand new instructional video. Are you ready? I'm really proud of this one. It's so much fun. There we go. Hey guys, Frank here, and welcome to this intro to our brand new tutorial inside the model shoot. Now, in all honesty, we've released a lot of instructional videos over the years and have written a lot of books. But there are always questions that return, and there's always new stuff that we can teach you guys. So in this tutorial, we are talking about workflow, tethering, gear, also our new strobes, of course. We're talking about the use of softboxes, the difference between softboxes, why you can use an omnidirectional light source. We're going to talk a lot about color, not only for accent colors and what colors do with evoking emotion, but we're also going to show you how you can use red, green and blue gels to create a beautiful image without using any normal lighting. So no white lighting, only 3 gels. I take you through several lighting setups. And of course, we're gonna show you how you can build a super creative set with our model and stylist Nadine and how to light it. In other words, it's another video that's jam-packed with information that has a really high tempo like this. And of course, if after the video you have any questions, just email us and we will always reply. So if you want to learn more about photography, if you just love model photography and want to know everything about it, check out our brand new tutorial called Inside the Model Shoot. And it's exactly that. We're going to take you inside our model shoot. I can't wait for you guys to check it out. So where can you get it? Let me see. I will find it for you guys. There we go. So you can find it on our web shop, frankdorff.com/shop. And you can find it under the label Frank's Corner or Tutorials. So, okay, let's continue our presentation. Color. Now, as you all know, color evokes emotion, and that's the cool part. I love colors because colors are everything. Even black and white is in essence color because there's no color information, but there's still luminance information. And this is the part where it gets interesting. So, let's talk about color a little bit. Or everything was, I hope, interesting, but now it's getting a little bit more interesting and a little bit more in-depth. And I know you guys love in-depth stuff, but it's not always time for in-depth stuff because also people, well, find it a little bit boring. So I try to do it as interesting as possible. What you see here is the so-called color triangle. It contains the colors red, green and blue as our primary colors. When we look at the middle part, you see the black body curve. Now the black body curve was something that we inherited from Mr. Kelvin. Mr. Kelvin threw a black body in the fire, and a black body I mean metal, of course, don't get me wrong. I realized it when I said it, sorry. So he threw something in the fire and it became red. And he said, well, it's pretty hot. So he called that 2800 degrees, for example. Now it turned white and he said, well, that's much hotter. So he said 6500, and then it became blue. He was going, wow, that's really hot. 99,000 degrees Kelvin. So we have a scale going from low, warm, to really hot, bluish. And this is something that you have to wrap your head around, because normally you would say if it's warm, it's red, right? And it is. But you would expect a higher temperature than blue, because blue is cold. So why is the temperature on blue higher? Very simple. That's how that black body behaves when you throw it in the fire. Metal becomes first red, then it becomes white, and then it becomes actually blue. Now, of course, we want neutral white. Now, if everybody just did something, no images would look the same on no computers or on no prints, and in the past, of course, on paper. Now, and we still use paper, of course, sorry. And what we did is we choose one point and a color space. So that means that we defined points in that triangle, and we call those a color space. For example, the ones that you know is, for example, sRGB, small color space, Adobe RGB, bigger color space, and Pro Photo RGB, a really big color space. But there's more. For example, when you go to video and you go to SDR, we call something called Rec 709. When you go to HDR, we go to P3 or BT2020. And within those colors, we also have a gamma curve. In other words, how do we go from black to white? But we're not going to talk about it here. The thing I want to talk about is those three primary colors, red, green, and blue, and the black body curve in the middle with one white point called D65, or in other words, 6500 degrees Kelvin. This is our white point, and it's a little bit reddish. So if you calibrate your monitor and you look at your whites and you go like, ooh, those are a little bit reddish, that's actually 100% correct. They should be a little bit reddish. So I hear you going like, Frank, are you absolutely right that red, green, and blue are the primary colors? Trust me, I am 100% right. Because we have different kinds of colors. We have so-called additive colors and subtractive colors. Now, we have colors that are mixed by emitting light, and we have colors that are mixed by mixing materials. And that's, for example, a printer. Now, a printer works with the colors cyan, magenta, yellow, and key. A lot of people say black, and that's because there's a black module in the printer, but it's actually key, or in other words, luminance. So we now know that we have those three primary colors, red, green, and blue. We have a black body curve, we have a gamma curve which determines the luminance of those colors, and we have the coordinates of that color space. But how do we get the secondary colors? The secondary colors isn't that hard to imagine. So let me go to another slide very quickly. When we look at this one where you see the color spaces, you can see the white point in the middle. Now just imagine drawing a line from our primary color red through the white point. So where do you end up? Exactly, cyan. Now when you do it from blue through the white point, you end up in yellow. Now when you do it from green to the white point, you end up in magenta. Correct. So the secondary colors and the primary colors are connected when you draw lines through the white point. Now when you go into Lightroom and your other raw converters, you will literally see the same thing. When you change the white balance, you often change between red and blue. You also see a GM, U. And that's actually wrong, because it's not U. It's actually green magenta, where you just move it this way. So you can move the color balance this way over the triangle, or you can move it this way. Or of course in a triangle, depending on where you move. So always remember, when you change with, for example, red and blue gels, you don't touch the G&M, because you don't want to do anything with green and magenta. You use the red and blue, so that's your color temperature. Right? I'm going to show that in a minute. Now, just to make something clear, this shot was done in 2015. What I'm using here is exactly the same I'm going to show you in a second. There's only one huge difference. I stopped using this technique for a very, very simple reason. This one is okay. But when you start doing it like this is where I came into a lot of problems. I didn't like this at all, for the very simple reason I want the colors to melt together. And at that point, with my strobes I was using at that point, Ellingrome and later of course Hensel, if I wanted a soft light source with a gel, I had to gel a whole softbox, which isn't something that I like to do. Now with the new Giotto strobes, I have a totally different option, because now I can use the Rogue magnetic system in front of my strobe and then place my softbox. So now I'm able to use huge, large softboxes totally in a color. Red, green, blue, it doesn't matter. As long as I place my gel behind the softbox, I can light the whole softbox. And that creates a beautiful new option to create something really nice with colors that blend together, because soft light has a soft edge transfer. Harsh light has a hard edge transfer, and look at this shot. I can't do it with red and blue combined, because at that point you will literally see it clashing together. When I use a soft light source, it just blends together. And of course we want to show you that. So, the first thing I want to show you is a little trick that I just explained by moving your color slider. Now watch this. This is one strobe with an omnidirectional dome from Rogue from the left side of your image. So that's white light. On the other side, we have strip light with a blue gel behind it. As you can see here, the model looks normal, the backdrop looks blue. Same here, white light, a little bit green, yellow of course, but you can see it's white, and the blue. Hey, wait a minute, I'm totally going to blue. What the hell happened? See this? There's no more white light, it's all a little bit blue and cyan. Let me show you what we did, because it's actually pretty cool. Now in Lightroom or your favorite raw converter, you can use your color temperature. Now look at this. So This is the normal color. Now change it to blue or get more of that yellow in. Add a little bit of contrast. And there we go. So I can literally manipulate the color whatever I want. So as you can see, this is one of the things that I love to do for a client. If a client isn't 100% sure if he or she likes that blue color, but they do like it as an accent color, it doesn't make any sense to shoot it with, for example, a cyan gel and a blue gel, because maybe my customer looks at the image and goes, ooh, that looks really nice with that cyan and that blue. Make all the shots like that. Don't do that. Please don't. Because it happens a lot that my client in the studio said, that's okay, I love that blue. And then he goes back to his partner, which actually pays the money probably, and they go like, oh my God, I really don't like that. I want the face at least to look normal. Please do that. I like the blue, but the face has to be normal. The cool thing with this trick, by using that white balance, I can still shoot with normal light on that side and my accent light on that side, and I can still move around. So if my client later goes like, oh, I want the face to be natural, no problem at all, just change the color temperature back. And the cool thing is the blue will get even more saturated, of course, because you move towards the blue. By the way, if you have in between any questions, feel free to ask them. Now, a little bit of an explanation, if you just tuned in and you think like, hey, nice story, but it looks different from normal, I lose my track sometimes. That's absolutely true, because 1 hour before the broadcast, I was still totally ready to do a photo shoot with a Harley Davidson and smoke and lights, and we had everything set up for that. And then we got a call that our model Claudia is sick. So Claudia, get well soon, at least up until August 1, because then we are going to do that photo shoot. So I literally had 1 hour to throw together this presentation and get all the stories straight in my head. And in all honesty, this is tricky stuff, but we do it all the time. So I hope it comes over natural. But if it sometimes feels a little bit like I'm looking for words, it's 100% because I only had 1 hour to prepare the whole presentation and do everything for you guys. So, okay, now let's add a little bit of atmosphere. So what I'm using here is normal light from the front, the same as we did with the shot with Lois. This is Claudia. And I have one blue on the back. Actually, with this one, we used a slightly thinner gel to give it a little bit more of a white light in the lens flare. So I really like that. But let's do it differently. Let's use that blue and add some red, but we're not going to change anything on the model. We're just going to use red and blue in a set that we created from click backdrops. Now, if you follow our vlog, you know that we've recently been to the UK for Click Live event, and one of the things that I actually saw there that really triggered my creativity was how they use the click backdrops. Now, we are the distributor for click backdrops and for the Netherlands. And the backdrops are awesome, and what I normally do in our studio, we of course use one backdrop and a floor part, and sometimes I also use a second one on the side to just block it off. What I saw in England was something that I didn't really think about until you see it. They use, for example, brick walls on one side and then a window on the middle side. And with the proper floor part, you really had the idea that you were in an old building. And I think that was so cool. So now we are actually ordering a new click backdrops with, for example, motifs of stones or chalk. We're going to create something with at least 2 walls and a floor part. And this is actually the first time we tried it in that setup by also adding some props. And I have to be totally clear, we did this before, but never with the intention to build a whole set. It just happened. So as you can see here, we are actually fitting the stuff together now more in a set. So the previous times we did it, we just had, I believe, a Pro Fabric on one side with the nice flowers, and then we had the blue on one side. And the Pro Fabric was actually more just to block it off. So in other words, you did see it, but it never was a real part of the shot. It was just something that was there because we wanted to shoot in the depth. And then if you see it a little bit on the back, that's no problem at all. This is one of the first times where we're actually going to use it really as a set, so lighting both sides. And that's the difference. In the past, we never lit both sides. I always lit one side and the other side was just there to fill it up. I hope that explains it a little bit. Now, when Claudia came into the set with this outfit, I really got some big David Bowie, Freddie Mercury vibes. So I thought, you know what, let's create a little bit of an atmosphere where it looks like she just went off stage or has to go on stage. I love the sneakers. One of the students said, I don't like the sneakers in this setup. I agree, barefoot would be an option, but somehow the sneakers, you know, Freddie Mercury always wore those Nikes. I just wanted her to wear those sneakers, and I think it fits the image. Now, she's sitting on a flight case, and as I mentioned before, we also have a home theater company, and I do high-end calibrations, and it was actually a projector for a mini cinema. So that meant that I had to calibrate the projector, and it was delivered in a big flight case. So we thought, why not use the flight case as a prop? And the other things, we call them trussen in the Netherlands, it's in the back. And those are just, I got them from a friend who owns a toy store, and they use it to hang lights in the store. He didn't use them anymore, and he wanted to throw them out. And I said, ooh, give them to me. So we use them in the studio sometimes to just create a little bit of depth in a set. So here we're using one red from the left side on the image and one blue from the right side of the image. Now you don't see the red, but that's because we're not done yet. Here you can see that the red is just very, very shining through. It's very, very soft. But when I did this shot, I said, you know what, I do like it, but it all looks blue because the red just disappears. So we thought, let's up the ante just a little bit. And let's first look at some shots that we did with the same setup, but now we're actually adding something. So watch this. This is red and blue combined, but there's nothing else. And it isn't an image where you look like, wow, right? But what happens if we do this? See the difference? I'm literally using a red gel, a blue gel on the sides, and a green gel right in front. Same setup as I did in 2015 with Manon, but you see the difference when you use softer light sources. It now wraps around much easier. All that hardness is gone. I don't have that competing shadows anymore, which annoyed the heck out of me because I love working with colors. Now by using the gels behind the softboxes, now I finally can use big softboxes and just use it like this. Now, the funny thing is when you use colors with gels and you overlay red, green and blue in the right combination, you get white. Now, this is why we have green on the face. Now, when you shoot it from the side, as you can see here, because I'm not hitting that red part, it looks green, as you can see here. But when I'm shooting it from the front, you can see that in the middle, there's a little bit of white light. Now, we didn't want it pure white because then you go like, hey, what's the fun in this shot? And that's the cool thing about working with gels like this. By changing the balance between those gels, you can literally just balance the colors. If you want pure white, make sure that in the center everything is set up correctly. If you want a little bit more like play in your shot, I like the green to be a little bit higher because I don't like green, but in these cases as an accent light on the face, it just looks awesome, let's be honest. And when you shoot it slightly from the side with blue, as you can see here, you get this really nice, almost metallic color. And I hope on YouTube you can see the colors coming in through correctly. Shoot it from the other side and you get something completely different. And this is the magic of this setup. It's exactly the same setup. You just move around your model. Same thing that we do normally with strobes. Flat light, normal lighting, high contrast lighting. Move around your model. And it just looks great, I think. So different sides, different looks. So back to our set. Now, you remember that I said that there was red in the set and you didn't see it, right? Because it was only hitting a little bit of her costume, giving that nice oomph in the color. What if we are really pushing that red? Now, look at this. Now we are really pushing the reds on the side. We have the blue on the other side. And I did one extra thing. I added a small Giotto GT200, and I believe it was a GT200 with an omnidirectional dome from Rogue and a blue gel, and that's hovering straight above the model's hair. Now what I wanted to do was just give a little bit of accent on her hair, and everything else had to go to the camera, but I didn't want a huge lens flare. I just want, remember David Bowie, Freddie Mercury, stage lighting, I just want a little bit of shimmer going down. And as you can see here, you don't need Photoshop for that. You don't need Boris FX. Just take it in camera. Don't fix it or don't fake it when you can create it, right? It gives you much more satisfaction to just pull it off on set. And if you can't fix it on set, just use Photoshop. Let me see. Okay, so with the whole set, it looks like this. And of course, the close-ups look absolutely great. I just loved her outfit here. And, well, shoot it from top down. It gives you a totally different look. So, yeah. Love this setup. Okay, so let's go back because I did mess up the order just a little bit. Okay, there we go. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what you can do more with colors, because colors can evoke emotion, but colors can also be manipulated. Now, this is a shot we took with Lois outside, and it looks okay. It's nothing spectacular. You see the sky is blown out, the model is a little bit dark. I like the light on her face. It's, you know, when I would have shot this shot when I started with model photography, I would probably be very proud because it's a great model. I love the pose. I love the staircase again. See the leading line leading up to your model. There we go. And I just love the shot. But what if we just upped the ante just a little bit with a little bit more power on the strobes? There we go. Now this looks totally different. Now what I did here is I'm using my strobe to not mimic the ambient light, but overpower the ambient light, but not too much. Because if you go too much, you go day to night. And this is day to almost evening. Let me just call it like that. So now the model jumps out, the red shoes also, of course. The leading line is a little bit less in this shot. I like it a little bit more from the side, but hey, everything else in this shot I liked. But the other thing that you will see, now compare this, look at the back. Do you see that it's just black? There's no detail there at all. It's all black and a blown out sky. This was shot a few seconds later. Now look at the back. Do you see that the light is just hitting that stuff way different? It's, for me, this makes an image really come to life. Instead of just having some black in the back and a blown out sky, you get some really nice contrast in the, I don't know what it is, quarter waarschijnlijk or something else. It grows. Let me just put it that way. And it gets a really nice backlighting here. But what if, yeah, let's create something that's even more funkier. What if I use a green strobe on my model? Frank, are you crazy? Maybe, but let's try it. Yeah, that looks terrible. Oh my, no. Why did I put this? You know where I'm going, right? How about this? So what did I do? It's the same shot. It's a different shot, but it's the same shot. The only thing I did was use a color checker and balance on our new white point. Remember that color triangle? If you choose your white point on that black body curve, all the colors will look natural. That's why we use light meters and color checkers. But what if we fake our white point and we move the white point towards green? Now when we balance on green, everything else will drop down. So that means that everything that was normally blue or white or whatever will drop towards magenta. That's why we use green. If we use red, it moves the other way. If we use blue, it moves the other way. This is, by the way, a great option. For example, if you're in a hotel and you want to have that golden light hitting your model from the windows, don't use gels on the windows. Just use a blue gel on your model and correct on that blue gel, and you will find out that you will move a little bit towards that yellow. Okay, so let's continue. So we have this shot, and we did the same trick here. This is without the green gel, this is with the green gel. And the cool thing is you don't need Photoshop, you don't need any nice or funky selections. It just works. As long as you make sure that the part that you want natural is totally covered with green, you're fine and you're good to go. The nice thing, the other way around, is if you use a softer light source for this, you will get a really nice edge transfer, remember? So you go from white light to a little bit less, and then you will see that it just floats in that magenta, like a really nice edge transfer, and that's softer light sources. And here we do the same thing, of course, with our model Nadine. Okay, let's skip this part, because we already did that. Okay, so this shot we took this weekend from Claudia, and I wanted to include this one because a lot of people always go like, yeah, but you have this expensive gear and you have an expensive softboxes and you have an A7R4 camera and you shoot medium format and you have 25 years of experience. Guys, it doesn't matter. Gear, it's great. I love shooting with my Sony A7R5 and I love the quality of images. But I can do the same images with a Sony A7 or maybe even a 6500 or whatever. I can do the same. If I could trigger my strobes, I could do the same shot with my iPhone. No problem at all. Now, the strobes. I've shot with the most expensive strobes, and at this moment I made another choice. So we worked for many years for Ellingrom. Awesome strobes, I can highly recommend it. We switched from Elingroom to Hensel, and the only reason we switched was education. So with Hensel we had more options for education. We never knew that Corona would break out and that Hensel would get into financial problems a little bit. So when Hensel stopped, we decided, you know, I can go back to Elingroom, which I would love to do because again, those strobes are awesome. But and the people, by the way, too, I see them as family. So Elingroom, awesome brand. Anyway, so I could go back, but I thought, you know what? We have a lot of questions about people that say like, hey, we don't have a lot of money to spend. Can you also do the same stuff that you do with very, very cheap strobes? So we started a whole series of Lightroom and, tutorials with small strobes, speed lights. And when I worked with speed lights, there were a few things that I really liked. I liked the power in the studio, not outside, because, well, didn't have a lot of power outside. I liked HSS, but not that much, because with a speed light, HSS, it's nice, but it can't do what my big Elingroom or Hensel strobe can do with a 14-inch reflector that will literally kill the sun. The only problem is when I do it with an Hensel or an Elingroom, I shoot on f22 ISO 50. When I shoot it with HSS, I can do the same thing on 2.8, but that speed light isn't powerful enough. Use 2 speed lights. Yeah, and don't want to go there. Batteries run down pretty fast. Now, they can do maybe 100, 150 shots on full power, but that's not 100% true. They will start out really fast, and then after 25, 30 shots, you can already feel that it's slowly going down. And as soon as you hit 50, 100 shots, you don't want to shoot with those batteries anymore, so you have to exchange them. Also, the connection on the stands were always a little bit flaky. In other words, great, but not so much. And that's, of course, when Giotto came in. Giotto are smaller strobes. You see them in all the videos now because I've been using them for almost a year and a half. They are based on a speed light, but they are much bigger and more power. So we have a 200 watts and a 250 watts. Now the difference between the 250 and the 200 is not what you expect. The 200 actually outputs more light than the 250. And that's because the 250 uses a different flash tube and a different glass. So that's more for portraiture. If you don't use any modification, it gives you a nice quality of light. It's harsh, but it's nice. When you use the GT200, which is based on a speed light with a Fresnel, that's a very, very harsh quality of light, but it outputs a tremendous amount of light because it's a Fresnel. Now, with the GT200, I like it harsh, but most of the time you will use modification like softboxes, strip lights, beauty dishes, or whatnot more. So in essence, I always mix those two together. But the main advantage is because I now have 200 watts on location, or 250, I can use a lot more power. It still supports HSS and ETTL. So I can shoot outside without using a light meter, but then I have to correct a lot. And I can use on high-speed sync. And they are mountable on a stand very, very easily, and most of all, very stable. Plus, I can use, of course, a Bowens mount, I can use flash benders, I can use the magnetic system, and I can shoot at least 400 shots on full power before the strobe slows down. Huge advantages. But what do you place on a strobe like that? So now I've proven that you can do all the work that I do with very affordable strobes and literally also very affordable light shapers. But can it be even simpler? Yes. When you look at this shot, it looks really nice, right? You have just a little bit of light over the model. You can see the hand just a little bit. You can see the face perfectly. I like the shadow, so it's a smaller light source that's clear from the shadow. But I also love the way that the backdrop is lit. So probably if you ask it, somebody said, well, probably 2 light sources. One on the face of the model, one on the back, and maybe a reflector in the front, right? Sounds logical. No, because you don't see any double shadows. You don't see anything. Now, what's the setup? The Frank Doro flash bender. Only the flash bender. The thing is, look very closely. It's aimed just a little bit. So that means that I'm lighting the backdrop with one side of the flash bender. I'm lighting the face with the middle part of the flash bender. And it's aimed away from the hand. So it just gives a little bit of a kiss of light on the hand, creating a shot like this. Right? So you can still see the hands a little bit on both. You can see the face perfectly. The front is lit just the way that I want it, and we have the backdrop. So guys, if you know your lighting, if you know how to draw lines in your lighting, and I always compare that to Dexter, the blood spatter specialist, you know him, right? And what he does is, as soon as he comes into a scene, a crime scene, he will start drawing lines. This is a sharp object, this is a blunt object, this is where the body was moved. How does he know that? First is reading the light, but most of all, understanding the light. And for us, it's not that hard. We only have, most of the times, one or two light sources. Just look at the light source. How is it angled? If it's angled like this and the model is here, you draw a line and you know that the shadow will be here. If the backdrop is further away, you know that the shadow will be there. If you place your light lower, you will know that the shadow is right behind your model, so you don't want that. If you place your light really high, you know that the shadow falls straight behind your model. Now, if you use a soft an attachment like the Frank Dora Flash Bender, you know that it's a strip light with a grid. Now, you can use it as a snoot, softbox, a reflector, or as a strip light with a grid, and in this case it was the strip light. Now, when you look at the strip light, you know it's rectangular, right? So you also know that when you aim it straight up, you will just light your model top to bottom. But if you angle it horizontally, you know that you light her like this and a little bit of light fall off. But what if you use it on the sides and you use it as three light sources? So light source 1, light source 2, light source 3. In other words, 1, 2, 3. The center part is always the most brightest. This one is a little bit softer and this one is also a little bit softer. But that is with normal strobes. This one isn't mounted on a normal strobe. Let's go back to that picture. It's on a Giotto GT200 and there's a difference. With a speed light, or in this case the Giottos, the light isn't hitting the strip light like this. The light is actually hitting the strip light like this. And that gives you a much nicer and softer and more edge-to-edge quality of light. Because where you normally use your strip light and you use your strobe, the distance between your strobe and your strip light is not that big. So that means that the light comes out, hit the diffusion panel, and with a smaller strip light, it will literally give you, the center part is a little bit hotter, and the top and bottom part are just a little bit lower in light intensity. Also a little bit softer. That means, of course, that you can use it, for example, for your backdrops. In other words, you have three light sources, one very bright, one softer, one softer. With the Flash Bender, in this case, we're doing the opposite. We now don't have three light sources, we only have one. And that's the big advantage here, because I don't want a lot of light on our face and a little bit on the backdrop and our hands. No, I want it to be as equal as possible, because it's already very dark on the front because I'm placing my light behind my model. So by using the Flash Bender angled like this, I'm both lighting my backdrop, I am lighting my model's face, and because of the inverse square law, the hands are lower than the face, so the light falls off over the distance. I just have a little bit of light on the hands of the model. Now also by angling it correctly, you will light the front. Don't get me wrong, a setup like this is not something that you place and you shoot. No, this is something where you tell your model, stand. Okay, now you take a shot and you look at the hands. That's the big problem, the hands. I have a few images where the hands are just way too dark and you don't see them. Then you start moving your Flash Bender just a little bit forward. Okay, no, a little bit forward. Oh, now you can see a little bit of an edge. Just go a little bit forward. And it's like centimeters. Don't do it 10 centimeters at a time. Do it very, very slowly. I'm not going to say millimeters, but small pieces. And at one point you will see just hitting a little bit of the hand, and that's the part where you want it. Or maybe if you want something else, of course. Hey, it's up to you. It's your creativity. Okay, for now, I think we're done with the presentation that I wanted to do. So again, if you're just joining, our model called in sick 1 hour before our digital classroom. So everything you've seen now has been thrown together in 1 hour. So if sometimes I move around a little bit with the stories, please don't hold it against me, I wanted to say. Okay, let me see if there are any questions in the chat. No. Then I have one more final announcement, and I think that one is really cool. On September 7th, from 10 till 4, we are in Belgium, in Braasgaat, for Mastering the Model Shoot. This is a really intense workshop. This is a workshop which is aimed at every level of photographer. Meaning, if you struggle with your lighting and you want to just know how to place your lightings, it's perfect. But if you want to know a lot more about color, how to incorporate colors in your photo shoot, or do some advanced stuff like lens flares, work with a little bit of smoke, add some backdrops, etc., this is also the perfect workshop. Now, why is that? When I teach my workshops, I never follow a program. The thing that I found best to work in workshops is just sit down with the group. What do you want to learn? Now, if I have a beginner that has a lot of problems with white backdrops, I will incorporate a white backdrop into the workshop. Now, if I have a really advanced photographer that says, hey, I want to know how to fight lens flares, I will use that white backdrop and just turn up the backs to make it nuclear, and then explain very simple how to use flags to take away that lens flare. So first we're going to set up the way that it should be, and then we're adding that extra element for the advanced photographers. The cool thing is that the starting photographer sees the same techniques, and maybe he's not ready for it now, but maybe in a year, or maybe in a half year, or maybe right after the workshop he thinks like, hey, that looks easy, I can do that. So that's the workshops. And by the way, the workshops in the Netherlands are always in Dutch, but if you let us know 1 or 2 weeks in advance, we can switch them over to English. And we have a brand new service, and I'm really looking forward to starting this. We already have our first bookings in, and that's called the online one-on-one workshop. So what is the one-on-one online workshop? Of course, we have our digital classroom set up. So we have 4 cameras in our studio, and you can see all the images coming in. And of course, we have a communication via the chat, or we can of course do voice. And I thought, why not do an online workshop from 10 till 4, just the normal time that we normally teach the workshops. But if you are in a different country and you can't fly to the Netherlands because it's just way too expensive, or you can't fit it in your schedule, why not do a one-on-one? So you call in, you get a link, you can see everything live, and you can ask questions. So we start with the Q&A just like normal, you and me. We're just gonna talk, and then we take a little bit of a break, maybe 15 minutes. I'm gonna prepare everything, and then we're gonna do the whole workshop live. And in between, we have voice on over the speakers, so you can ask whatever you want. If you want me to turn the lights, I will turn the lights. If you want me to do something in Photoshop, we will do it in Photoshoot. The only thing that's tricky is you can't shoot the images unless you take screenshots, of course. So make sure you check out our website, frankdorov.com, and you can find information there about our new one-on-one workshops online. And I think it's gonna be really cool. Again, we just announced it and we already got our first bookings in. So make sure that you, that you don't miss the option. Okay, I see some questions coming in. Can you learn in Finnish one class? Then I come. I know one word in Finnish, I think it's, but I don't know if I can say it. We watched a lot of Wallander. And the thing is, I don't know, Finnish is not connected, by the way, to Scandinavia, I believe, in language. We went to Finland, and I think it's more connected to Russian languages. But the thing was, I heard the same, we always call it singing in the voices in Finland. And of course, we did visit Scandinavia a lot, like Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. And the funny thing, you're laughing, so I probably pronounced it or totally wrong, or he understood it 100% what it was. And it was a really bad word, I think. But that's the words that you learn, right? In a foreign language. The weird thing about, let me just focus on Danish. When I watch a movie in Danish and I have the subtitles on, I can understand 50% of what's going on, maybe 40%. But I can literally just figure out what's going on. Now, as soon as I turn off the subtitles, I'm gone. I don't understand anything anymore except that one word, and maybe brother or swaster, or whatever it's called, brother and sister. Those words still have connection to what we use in Dutch. So I am very afraid that Hokana, I can't do it in Finnish. I'm so sorry. I can do it in English or Dutch. Maybe Dutch is better. But it will be English, unless you learn me Finnish, of course. I'm always open for that. Okay, so he said both. So it's based on the Russian and Scandinavian languages. I thought I heard that because I couldn't place a lot of words, but that's singing. And Dutch is often very harsh for people. And somehow I just love the Scandinavian languages. It just sounds so incredibly nice. A little bit like the Swedish chef in the Muppets. And again, I don't mean that offensive, of course. I just love that language. Okay, so this was our digital classroom for today. Again, it was 100% improvised, and I hope you still enjoyed it. Make sure you check on August 1st, because then we're going to do the photo shoot with the Harley Davidson. If Claudia, of course, it's better, but we're gonna count on that. Guys, see you again next time, and stay creative, stay shooting, and well, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Bye, guys. Oh, and of course, the new video is online now. So if you go to our web shop, you can order the new video.